The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 125.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
It's when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Positionless. Wearing a mid-fin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're continuing our discussion of the end of season 3 of the reboot series from 2005. We're discussing the episode "The Sound of Drums," which is as we were talking about before, the boom 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 boom.
Yeah.
That's not annoying at all. We won't do that the whole episode, folks.
No, we won't.
Joining me today on the panel, as always, are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Hey, Dom.
Folks, remember to like the Secrets of Doctor Who page on Facebook. We have a page there, and we have some great conversations with folks. We have people who like the episodes and comment on them as they come up, and we often share those comments in our feedback, and we'd love for you to join the conversation. And when you do like the episodes there, that helps spread the love, spread the news that we have this podcast, and we're talking about Doctor Who. So if you could do that, we would greatly appreciate it, and we'd love to have you join us there if you're on Facebook. If you're on Twitter, you can follow us at SQPN, and you can retweet the episodes as we post them there every week. But comment and share and do all that stuff, and we love to hear from you and to interact with you. I mean, right now it's just the three of us talking, but this is about a community, and we love to engage with you as well. And we have so many new friends that we've made through the listeners to this podcast, and so it's such a blast.
And send us feedback so we'll have feedback to share.
Yes, we don't have feedback this week. We've had feedback in recent weeks, but no feedback this week. So we want to hear from you. So let's hear from you. We're continuing our discussion of the sound of, this one is The Sound of Drums. So this is the 3 Harold Saxon Master episodes as we finish out season 3 and the Martha Jones season. Yep. And go ahead.
I was just going to say the Martha Jones season.
Okay, yes. And so it aired in June of 2007, and we had the one last one was the Utopia. This one we're talking about the Sound of Drums, and the next one is called Last of the Time Lords. All right, so we have Martha and Jack. We're at the doctor. Finally, Harold Saxon's identity is revealed. So
this episode starts, it really drops us into the middle of things. We're on a street in London, and suddenly the Doctor, Jack, and Martha materialize, and they're all out of breath. And we learn via flashback how they got away from the year 1 trillion, because when we last saw them, the Master ditched them there as they were being attacked by the Future Kind. And so we learned that the Doctor quickly as they were holding the door shut against the Future Kind, the Doctor quickly repaired Jack's time wrist
vortex manipulator.
Yeah, so now they've jumped back to 21st century England.
Because the Doctor has the TARDIS, and thus TARDIS separation.
The Master has the TARDIS.
Yes. I'm sorry. The Master. So we have TARDIS separation, which is
very separated.
Yes. One of our key Doctor Who plot devices is we either have TARDIS separation, companion separation, or sometimes sonic screwdriver separation. Those things often drive the plot of a particular episode. So this is the TARDIS separation here, and that's a big deal because, as we'll see, having the TARDIS would have changed so much about the plot of this episode. The Doctor,
and in fact, restoring the TARDIS completely undoes the plot of this episode, The Year That Never Happened.
Exactly.
But that's next episode.
Yes, that is the episode that never happened yet. So now we have this this whole big thing about the identity of Harold Saxon, the new Prime Minister of Britain, just elected, and it's revealed that he's now the Master. And they've been building this; they've been laying the groundwork for this since The Runaway Bride, the Christmas episode with Donna Noble, a year and a half prior to this. So this was June 2007, and so it was the
18
Christmas
months ago.
Yeah, and so that's a long way to go back to to set this up and laying the breadcrumbs for us. And so now we have this, and we have this video, this news broadcast, and of the Master talking about Britain needs a doctor or something along those lines.
Yeah,
and then
I wondered about that because they're just in this like street, and there are several giant screen televisions up on lampposts, and I'm going, did they really have free public television screens on lampposts in the UK?
Maybe they were celebrating the election of a new government or something. I don't know. Yeah, it seems
put up a bunch of TVs.
Yeah, very convenient. And so they have to do research on Harold Saxon and the Master, and they go to his website and they see these endorsement videos of Harold Saxon by Sharon Osbourne. This group I called McFly.
Yep,
I'm old and don't know them.
I don't know them either, but
and Anne Widdecombe,
yeah, she is. I don't know her personally, but I have a bit of a connection to her because she is a Catholic Answers constituent.
Really?
She converted from Anglicanism to Catholicism, and she's a very serious Catholic. And so when Catholic Answers has gone to England before, we've met up with her and stuff like that.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, that's cool.
So who is, for the listeners who don't know, who is Anne Widdecombe?
Oh, she's a conservative politician. She retired a few years ago. But she's here doing a little cameo where she says, I think Harold Saxon's a great guy. She's standing right next to him.
Yes.
And she's saying, I think Harold Saxon is a great guy. He's a fine man and handsome, too. So clearly having fun here.
Yes. They don't quite tell us that Harold Saxon is either Labor or conservative. I think they kind of
they kind of imply that he's like his own thing.
Yeah,
he's kind of just broken off from all the parties because there's the scene coming up here where he's first meeting with the cabinet, only meeting with the cabinet, and calls them all that
traitors.
Traitors. Right. Yeah, they're traitors to their parties. That as soon as his ship was in ascension, they immediately jumped.
Yeah, and he says you abandoned your parties.
Okay,
and so it's that's how they handle it. He's not clearly Tory or Labor or Lib Dem. He's independent.
He's the Saxon party.
Yeah, right. So that drum beat we talked about and we demonstrated for you so amusingly at the start. That four note. So there's a lot of fans who are under the impression that comes from the opening bars of Ron Grainer's original Doctor Who theme song. But Russell T Davies is on record is saying that it was inspired by the sound of his alarm clock, and that it's not the theme song.
Oh, that's funny.
Maybe not, but the fact is you put it on a show that has that in its iconic opening theme, and you later explain it as the in the End of Time special as the heartbeat of a Time Lord who are known to have two hearts.
Right.
And so in context, it's going to take on that meaning regardless of where you got the idea.
I have to wonder, too, is this... Did someone realize if we say it was inspired by Grainer's theme, we have to pay him royalties?
There could be some of that, I'm sure.
Yeah. And the maker of the alarm clock is so far anonymous, so they probably don't have to worry too much about it.
Well, yeah, the alarm clock beep is probably, a 5-cent chip from China that no one even knows who actually invented it in the first place. So
Right.
But in the show, as soon as they land and as soon as we start building up to the TV screen reveal of the Master, people are like, there's a homeless guy tapping a coin on a cup in that rhythm, and other people are doing it. We see people like listening to their earbuds and they're patting their hands on their legs doing that rhythm. And at one moment, as the doctor is talking to Martha about Harold Saxon, Martha starts doing it without even realizing it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Which is creepy.
It's yes. And now, speaking of Martha, she's confused now by Harold Saxon. I mean, because she recognizes him. He's a politician. What does he have to do with?
She was going to vote for him. Right.
And what does he have to do with Professor Yana? And so this is where she learns about regeneration. For the first time, she had not known that the doctor could change appearances.
Right.
And
well, it was interesting though, because this was they did kind of twist the typical trope of the doctor knows everything in this, because who's the first one to recognize who the master was? Martha. She goes, because as soon as he regenerated and she heard his voice, it's like, I know that voice. Where do I know that voice? And then of course they get to Earth and she makes that connection immediately. Oh, that voice I heard was Harold Saxton. He's been under our nose the whole time.
Right.
And the doctor's going, oh, I didn't catch that.
Right. Yeah. And they have to provide an explanation for why the doctor didn't catch it, because he tells them, when they're looking for the master, who they haven't seen at this point, they say, well, how are we going to know him when we find him? And the doctor says, I'll know. Time Lords always know. And so, and they previously, as far back as the Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, have explained that that's how the doctor knows there are no Time Lords left, is he would sense them if there were. And so they've got to explain, well, how can the master have been here on Earth for 18 months, that year and a half since the wedding special, and the doctor has not noticed him all this time? It's because the master has this Archangel network, cell phone satellites that are putting out a low-level telepathic field that are both influencing the population and masking the master so the doctor can't sense him.
It's interesting how the Archangel network, that whole thing, is very similar to the Cybermen network from the parallel world.
Yeah, the lesson is clear. Our mobile phones are out to get us.
Yes.
Well, they are, but...
And so it's very interesting that the doctor is not just surprised that the master is prime minister, but he's also even more surprised that he has a wife. He's really shocked by this idea, which is interesting that the doctor would be shocked by this, given that, that you'd think at some point in all these regenerations, and especially given his relationship of whatever sort with Rose.
Yeah, well, but I mean, think about it from the doctor's point of view. The doctor views himself as the hero, as, a stable guy who could responsibly get married and have a granddaughter named Susan and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the master is this crazy man. How is he going to get anyone to marry him? It'd be like suddenly learning your enemy that you've been battling for all these years or centuries, who's never had a romantic relationship, is suddenly married.
It's like he has never paid attention to Hollywood.
Yeah, well,
exactly. All those crazy people who managed to find people to marry them. So speaking, you mentioned that Saxon's meeting with his cabinet. So the master Saxon sits down with the cabinet for the first time and kills them all like a Batman supervillain would.
I love the way I love this scene. This is one of two scenes in this episode that I really love, where he sits down with the cabinet. The first thing he does is let the business of government begin, and he throws all his folders up in the air, scattering papers everywhere. And then he has this funny or not funny thing.
Yes.
With one of the ministers, and then he calls them all traitors, and he puts on a gas mask, and the minister says, "What are you wearing?" And he says, "It's a gas mask." What? And he takes it off. It's a gas mask, and he puts it back on. Why are you wearing it? Because of the gas. What? Because of the gas. What gas? And then he, at that point, gasses them all aggressively. It's very aggressive gas.
And by the way, don't trust those conference room phones, the little things that sit on the middle of the desk. They're really gas dispensers.
That's right.
And as they're all dying, the minister turns to him and says, "You're insane." And he looks back wearing the gas mask and gives him two big thumbs up.
Yeah. I am disappointed that Davies did not write in "Are You My Mummy?" I mean, come on. If you're going to have a gas mask at this point, you've got to have "Are You My Mummy?" But yes, no, that was actually funny.
Stephen Moffat would have.
He would have.
Oh, yes.
That's right. Yeah, I liked that in that scene where he's like, "I'm not like," and then grin, and then I'm like, frown. He doesn't frown because you're traitors. So Martha points out that it's only been 4 days in the 21st century time span of her life since she met the doctor. Like that whole the hospital getting taken to the moon was only 4 days ago. So a lot has happened in the world in those 4 days. And
Subjectively, and they've been flying around space and time, all the time. Harold Saxon's been right there on the in London, and so then we also we find out that Martha's, I almost said Melanie, Martha's sister Tish has been hired to work at 10 Downing Street, the residence of the Prime Minister, and she's not quite sure why or what she's doing there. I love she's left a phone message for Martha to tell her this, and Martha listens to the first part of the message, and she hears Tish saying, "You won't believe it, I just got this new job," and she stops listening to the message and says, "Oh, like it matters," because she's so concerned about the master and doesn't know what her sister was about to reveal.
Yes. Oh, always listen to your messages, Martha.
And by the way, this is the newly rebuilt 10 Downing Street since they destroyed it with the Slitheenes.
Yeah.
And we do get a reference to Harriet Jones here as well, that ever since the Harriet Jones episode, because you remember the doctor, after Harriet Jones shot up the ship, the Christmas ship, the
Sycorax ship.
Sycorax ship, thank you, with the Torchwood weapon, he manipulated things to make it so that she would be retired. That, doesn't she look tired and sickly? And so there's this whole reference to that
short golden age,
very short golden age, and so that opened the door. So the doctor's somewhat responsible for opening the door to let Harold Saxon become Prime Minister. So he's a bit responsible for this.
Yeah, and he was his first act was being the minister in charge of setting up the Archangel Network.
We've learned this when this reporter Vivian Rook, who starts out to be she looks like vapid and manipulating and sort of a bizarre, like a gossip reporter.
Kind of a busybody. Yeah, busybody.
Mm-hmm. Although she says she wrote the definitive think piece on Harold Saxon.
Right. She wheedles her way into Lucy Saxon's office to do a sit-down interview with her. But then as soon as she's alone with her, she reveals that she knows what Saxon is and she's trying to warn her. And I'm thinking, like, why do you assume that she doesn't know who he really is? Like, I mean,
exactly.
Well, I think her assumption, and by the way, I really like Vivian Rook. She reminds me actually quite a bit of Harriet Jones.
Yeah.
It's not the same actress, but it's much the same vibe personality-wise. And she can come across as being just very serious. And but she knows that everything in Harold Saxon's life is window dressing, that he's really only been here for 18 months. The scam, she says, is like screamingly obvious, but no one notices it. And she assumes, therefore, that Lucy Saxon is just more of the window dressing and is as taken in as everybody, but she wants to flip her to try to help expose all of this so the public will finally take note.
Right, but it turns out Lucy's in on it, and Saxon shows up in the room. He kind of just pops into existence in the room somehow. I thought it was interesting.
By the way, I found it straining credibility to think that they would not have security personnel in this room.
Yeah,
exactly. I can't imagine the First Lady of the United States being left alone with a reporter, especially in this kind of casual way, without pat downs and weapons checks and background checks and
without at least someone, like Secret Service sitting in the corner. If he's just sitting there reading a paper, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's standard protocol to always have someone in the room. I'm not sure it is.
Well, they gesture at it because Tish says, "Well, I'm supposed to stay," and Vivian pushes her out of the room anyway.
Yeah, well, because Tish is.
But it should be a someone there with a gun.
Perhaps, yeah. There's so much that happens with Harold Saxon that doesn't make any sense from a security standpoint. The whole cabinet thing, that should never been able to happen. But I thought go ahead.
But by the way, notice when Saxon comes into the room, he refers to Lucy as my faithful companion.
I was literally about to say that. Yep.
That word, and that's going to turn out to be literally true. Before she was his wife, she was the master's companion.
Right. It's that sort of mirror dark version of that idea of the doctor's companions. Lucy is a master. Did the master ever have companions before?
It really depends how you define it, because if you look at on the Wikia, they actually do list master's companions, and it basically ends up being people who worked with the master
temporarily, what's his name, the Oriental guy from San Francisco in the TV movie.
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah,
and maybe Adric once, I forget. But
henchmen and dupes.
Yeah. And in Big Finish, they've expanded on this kind of stuff, and he has much more substantial companions, including like in the first volume of the War Master. He has a running companion who like wants to try to save a planet, and the Master's going, "It's not going to work, but do you want to try to save this planet? I won't stop you." And so he's kind of the morally ambiguous Derek Jacobi Master.
Okay.
Also, in Big Finish, they have the monk has had companions, and and even one of the Doctor's own companions went over and became the monk's companion for a while.
Interesting. So in this scene, we have it finishes with these 4 spheres popping into existence in the room at the Doctor's command, which 4 is an interesting number because there are 4 beats in the drum beat. We have 4 spheres. 4 keeps popping up in this episode. And I thought it was funny. The female sphere says, "The lady doesn't like us," and the male voice sphere, "Silly lady," and then it says, "Dead lady."
And they have these spiky knives come out and start swirling around like crazy. And so the implication is she's about to be sliced up into tiny pieces.
That would make a lot of mess in that room, don't you think?
I thought the same thing. I don't know how they dealt with the mess.
It was kind of funny, the door opening and closing thing.
Yeah. I was going to say, I love so the Master hustles Lucy out of the room and closes the door. And this is like a totally soundproof door because you cannot hear Vivian Rook screaming. And then he opens the door a little bit and you hear the screaming resume suddenly, and he closes it again, and he's like he's making this unpleasant facial expression in reaction to what's happened to her. And then he opens the door again, and the screaming instantly pops back on, and he closes it again, and he puts his finger up to his mouth and bites it in horror.
So Martha and Jack, this is when they talk about they've always liked Harold Saxon, but they can't, and would have voted for him, but they can't think of a single policy stance of his that they favored. And this is when the Doctor gets the idea that the Archangel Network, that people were hypnotized into supporting him and voting for him and ignoring the inconsistencies about him. Then Saxon goes on TV and he announces that these aliens are coming and we're going to be our friends. And he calls them the Toclafane, which the Doctor says it's a Gallifreyan fairy tale. It's like the 7 dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
And so
or the bogeyman, he says.
The bogeyman or boogeyman, which Americans might say.
That's the American pronunciation.
The bad pronunciation. Let's speak honest here. Bogey is much better. So
we do talk about bogeys on Radar Returns.
We do actually. Yes. So that's why we have a bad pronunciation of boogeyman. The Master then blows up Martha's apartment. He's trying to blow up the Doctor and Martha and Jack.
Very cartoonish, by the way. I love the dynamite looks just like a stereotypical Looney Tunes bundle of dynamite.
Yes, it was a sort of just like a Batman supervillain bomb from back in the 60s version of Batman. Very cartoonish. And then and so they have to go on the run, and Martha is trying to call her mom. Every time the Doctor tells Martha not to do something, she says, "I don't care," and does it anyway.
Yeah,
like she's totally off.
Specifically, I'll do what I want.
Right. Right. I mean, she is totally off the reservation. He is complete at this point. The Doctor is almost completely powerless to fix anything, to influence anybody. Everything's running out of his control.
In fact, they point this out earlier when they're in Martha's apartment. They say, well, if the Master's got the TARDIS, he could be anywhere in space and time. And the Doctor's like, nope, that's the one thing I could do. And we saw him do this in the previous episode. As the Master was stealing the TARDIS, the Doctor did something with the sonic screwdriver that caused a little explosion on the TARDIS console. And now we find out what that was. The Doctor was locking the coordinates so that the TARDIS can only travel between its present location in the year 1 trillion and its last location, which was like in Martha's apartment in 2008, I guess, since this is a year ahead of what's being aired. And so it can only bounce back and forth between those two locations right now.
So it's like locking the TARDIS browser to the back button only.
Right.
Yeah. And so you can hit the forward and back button, but that's it. Except because he's a Time Lord and because plot reasons, the Master has a little fudge room, and the Doctor says, oh, well, maybe he could vary it by 18 months, but that's it. And so that explains how he's been here all this time.
It is also the TARDIS, which has been shown to be unreliable on a good day. So
right. So when the Doctor finally gets on the phone with the Master, like his reaction, Saxon's reaction is almost like he craves hearing the Doctor's voice. It's like it's a comfort almost to him to hear it. It's very interesting, this relationship.
Yeah, this is the other scene I really liked because it starts. He's the Master. By the way, so they pursued Martha's family, and Martha insisted on trying to drive to them to find them, and actually her dad was the one her supposed deadbeat dad is the one who warns her. Mom didn't warn her, but Dad did, and so Dad makes good. And so they go on the run, and Martha decides to call her brother to warn him. And while she's talking to her brother, the Master breaks in on the line and starts taunting Martha over her own phone. And he's sitting in his cabinet meeting room talking to her over speakerphone. But when she puts the Doctor on and he realizes he gets a chance to talk to the Doctor, he switches the call to his own mobile phone that he puts right up to his ear. So it's much more intimate for him to talk to the Doctor than it was to Martha.
Yes. The Doctor says, "Oh, Master," and in Saxon's, "I like it when you use my name." And you chose it. Psychiatrist Field Day, as you chose yours. So there's a little bit of back and forth then.
Yeah.
It was interesting. They kind of set up the idea of the War Master here, too, where the Doctor specifically says, so why did they resurrect you?
Right.
Yeah.
To be a warrior in the Time War. But he didn't know that Gallifrey and the Time Lords are gone. That's interesting.
He wasn't there for the whole war. He explained what happened. He says, I was there when the Dalek Emperor took control of the Cruciform, and I ran, and I made myself human to hide. And he says, because I was so scared. And for the Master to be vulnerable like that and to admit it to his best frenemy is striking. But that's why he didn't see the end of the Time War. It's because he ran away to become a human. And then when he realizes that it was the Doctor who caused Gallifrey to burn, he says, you must have been like God. Notice not a God.
Right.
The God.
Right. It's very, and is something that the Master himself probably would fantasize about doing. He also mocks the Doctor for ticking every demographic box in his choice of companions.
That was fun. That was a nice meta moment. It's like, yes, we know this goes into show producer thinking, so we're acknowledging it now.
Right. And then he also says he sent Torchwood on a wild goose chase to the Himalayas, thus, explaining why Jack's team isn't available. So there's that.
He also starts watching them on security camera footage. And this was a big deal at the time that it's like London is covered in security cams.
Right.
And there are security concerns about that. And today people, I guess, maybe have just kind of gotten used to it because we don't see news stories about it, at least here in America as much.
Right.
But he starts watching the Doctor on the security cams and is like, "You're on telly."
Right. Yeah, because he puts him on the television in front of him.
And actually, it is kind of interesting. We talked about the security cams. I think we've almost kind of hit the point, even here in America, where it's kind of flipped, where people are almost upset there isn't more security cam coverage for certain things.
Yeah, so when something happens in the news, people are upset that we don't have footage of it.
Yeah, right. I'm not upset about that, but I find myself, because I don't watch news, but I find myself watching like detective shows and things, and it's like, okay, so where's the security cam footage? Today this would all be solved, but back in Columbo's day, they didn't have that.
Exactly, right. That and various telephone things that they can't do.
Yeah, just like they have to, pull over and call in, instead of just, hitting the Bluetooth button on their car.
So Martha makes a joke about the Master being the Doctor's secret brother, and he gives her a weird look.
Yeah, he says you've been watching too much TV. But this was a huge fan theory that the Doctor and the Master are really brothers. And there's some evidence for that on screen. There's an episode, Planet of Fire, in the Peter Davison era, where the Master is being consumed by flames at the end. And he says to the Doctor, "Won't you even have mercy on your own?" And then he gets consumed by the flames. And so we don't hear the noun that should have followed the pronoun. But fans have widely thought it should be brother. And in the Stephen Moffat era, we get a little more evidence of this, because when Clara is made present in the barn when the Doctor's a little boy, we hear the Gallifreyan lady talking about the boys and how this space was for them. And so in my own headcanon, they're definitely brothers. But he says you've been watching too much TV, and I can't help wondering if that's a reference to the Planet of Fire episode, which gave us on-screen evidence.
Right.
Also, speaking of watching too much TV, the Master is watching the Teletubbies.
Yes.
And he thinks it's like a real species on Earth.
Yeah, television in their stomachs. Now that's evolution. That struck a chord for me, because when I first encountered the Teletubbies, I had no idea what they were. I came home one night. This was, I guess, in the 90s. I came home one night and I turned on PBS, and it was a Saturday night at like 11:30 at night. And for some reason, they were showing the Teletubbies.
College kids smoking illicit substances.
Well,
probably.
Okay. Point taken. However, this is not a normal time for a children's program. And so I thought it was performance art. It was so bizarre. I thought it was some kind of high budget performance art.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
No, it just turns out it's low budget children's television.
Stay tuned for Secrets of Teletubbies on the SQPN network.
Yeah. Again. Have that one, Dom.
So the Doctor,
I have a trick for it. They say if you want to memorize vocabulary in other languages, you want to use the silliest mnemonic devices possible. So to remember the word for again, because that's one of the things the Teletubbies say when they want something to happen again, I imagine the Teletubbies saying the word in whatever language I'm memorizing. So in Greek, the Teletubbies say pollen, pollen. And in Latin, the Teletubbies say iterum, iterum.
That is an interesting mnemonic device. So back to Doctor Who. The Doctor's in the warehouse with Jack and Martha. They're on the run, and he tells them about Gallifrey and the Time Lords, and he describes Gallifrey, the shining world of the seven systems, and on the continent of wild endeavor, and the mountains of solace and solitude. And it sounds so grandiose, but when you think about it, our names for things, for geographical locations, are that we just use different languages for them. Like, the Rio Grande River literally means the big river. That sort of thing. If we just translated things into English, it would sound like that.
I do that as a game for myself when I'm driving. I'll back translate into English what this must mean, but the big river doesn't sound as grandiose as the continent of wild endeavor.
Right.
Yeah. But that's something that was pointed out as far back at least as the Seventh Doctor, because there's an episode of Sylvester McCoy's doctor, where he is coming back to where he left the Hand of Rassilon in 1963. Mm-hmm. And Ace calls him on it, and it's like, okay, it's really a weapon, but we give things fancy names.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Gallifreyans are kind of a bombastic race of people. So we also find out that the Gallifreyan children are exposed to the untempered schism, the raw power of time and space.
At age 8. At
age 8. That's sort of their first communion and confirmation, I guess. But this drives the Master insane when he's exposed to it, is the Doctor's theory. And
yeah, he says some of this is their initiation into the Time Lord Academy, and he says some are inspired, some run away, and some went mad. And Martha says, "What about you?" He says, "I ran. I never stopped."
Yeah. Yeah. Although he ran much later than 8 years old.
Much later. Yeah.
Yes.
And
so did the Master.
Children look much older than we do. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. But the Master also did end up going to the Academy because, as we learn in his very first appearance in Terror of the Autons, he's had a higher degree in cosmic science than the Doctor did. And the Doctor says, "I was a late developer."
Right. He had a terminal degree. So that Jack then explains that Torchwood isn't what the Doctor remembers, that he's been trying to make it better. That's
the
debatable.
Doctor is really mad to learn that Jack is part of Torchwood.
Right. And Jack's trying to, I swear to you, it's different, he says.
Well, you can understand, since Torchwood was literally founded by Queen Victoria to hunt down the Doctor.
Right, or any other alien threats like the Doctor.
Threat, but specifically the Doctor. You know.
So they get a recorded message from that reporter who had been killed, Vivian Rook, about the Archangel Network.
She is so great. I would love to see more of her, but she's only in this one episode.
Yes, and apparently, well, in the year that never if the year that never happened, that means she's probably not dead.
No, she died before the paradox started.
Oh, yep. Right. The paradox, when the paradox machine starts. We'll get to that. So the Doctor uses some of his spare TARDIS keys to make perception filters out of various bits and pieces so that they can walk around without people perceiving them. They're not invisible, but they're just not noticeable.
Yeah. Also, we get a little more...
for introverts, that'd be sure nice to have, wouldn't it? A little portable perception filter.
Yes. Don't look at me.
We also get a little more info on the Toclafane because a couple of the spheres show up to talk, or at least one shows up to talk to the Master, and it's fearful. It's saying the never-ending darkness is coming and the great cold, and we don't know what that's a reference to, but the Doctor promises, the Master promises that he'll fix the problem tomorrow when they have their big public unveiling.
Right.
And go back and tell your people.
Right. And we'll find out all about the Toclafane and their origin, their horrible origin in the Last of the Time Lords episode next week. So I do want to mention, like, when they get these perception filters, Jack, the Doctor says it's like when you fancy someone and they don't even know you exist. Or Martha says that.
Yeah.
And Jack says to Martha, "Oh, you too, huh?" So we're supposed to, I think, get this idea that Jack fancies the Doctor or something like that.
Right. Oh, we're definitely meant to understand.
Oh, there's no subtlety there.
Yeah.
Subtlety is not Jack's thing.
I do like the way they filmed that, though, when the Doctor put on that filter where they just shifted the camera.
They just keep moving it to the left as Martha's trying to look at him.
Back and forth. I thought that was so cool the way they filmed that. I think that was very effective to show kind of how it works.
Yeah, because they don't make him invisible, but he says, "Martha, look at me," and he puts on the key, and her gaze just keeps moving, and it's like, and he's talking to her and waving at her, but she's like, "I know you're there, but I don't want to know it."
Yeah,
right. Right, it uses our own understanding, our own built-in understanding of how TV shows should be framed on camera to kind of mess with us a little bit. Because when you move the camera off of the main character, you're not seeing them anymore. So it's very effective. So Harold Saxon meets with the president-elect of the United States, who's a little ticked at him for violating the protocol that the UN Security Council decided on in 1968 on proper first contact, and tells him that UNIT is in charge. He also says that protocol says it can't happen on sovereign soil, so it take place on the carrier Valiant, which...
Yeah, and this is interesting. So, first of all, we have a president-elect. He's acting like a president.
Right.
Yeah. President-elects don't. The real president at this moment would be the one doing this, not the president-elect.
Exactly.
We eventually learn his name, which is Arthur Coleman Winters. And there's apparently been this 1968 protocol on first contact, which presumably would have like coincided with the founding of UNIT or something like that.
Right.
And it's obviously the laws in the Whoniverse are different than in the real universe, because he tells Saxon there are petitions at the UN because of what he's done. There are petitions at the UN to have him removed from office if he doesn't do things right. And that's like the UN in the real world could never remove a sovereign head of state from office.
I mean, first of all, they don't have the power, and secondly, they're not efficient enough to actually get the vote in to vote to do it. So,
right.
Yeah. But I like the thought that went into the first contact should not take place on sovereign soil. That makes sense, because that would tend to elevate one nation above others in terms of dealing with aliens. It could make sense to say, okay, if we know we're going to have a diplomatic meeting, it should be a neutral territory.
Right. So interesting to think about also, given that this is 2007, it was filmed, it was set in 2008. That's when there was a U.S. presidential election. So that between
good point,
November and
January, when the president gets sworn in.
That's when this must be occurring. And although they're not wearing overcoats, so who knows?
It's also 18 months after Christmas, which would mean June.
Right.
Exactly.
So then we have, he is a bit of a George W. Bush lookalike. People observed at the time.
Kinda.
I don't think so much, but I think there is this vibe of, they really took pokes at George W. Bush like in the Harriet Jones era.
Yeah.
But and they were mocking Tony Blair implicitly.
Right.
Here we have some of the same tension because, America's the larger power economically and militarily and so forth these days, but we have this historic connection to England, and there's a little bit of tension in terms of England wants its props.
Right.
The UK wants its props. They don't want Americans just barging in and bossing people around and stuff, which is sort of what happens here, except the president in this scene is doing this because of the UN. So he's acting on behalf of the UN. So he's not really just being a pushy American. And I thought that was interesting that we get a little more sympathy for the U.S. president than we have previously on the show. But when they get to the Valiant, we do have a throwaway line of dialogue where he's saying, I want my seal on this, not the UN seal.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of the pushy American coming out here.
And then contrast this with the Regeneration episode, which we've already discussed, where we also have a U.S. president, but by that point, it's Obama and the treatment that's done there. I don't want to get too much into the politics
sycophantic.
of it. But
Exactly.
There's a much different feeling about U.S. presidents by that point. So the doctor says the master is a Time Lord. He's his responsibility. He's here to save him, not kill him. And I'm thinking, so how many people are going to die as a result of your decision to save the Time Lord and not kill him?
Yep.
So
a tenth of the population is going to die.
Well, there's a phrase for that too. It's called savior complex.
Right. And it for all his bombast about being the guardian of humans on Earth, when it comes down to saving the Gallifreyan, and even if he happens to be his brother, that takes precedence. So that's
and to be fair, that's not exactly out of character, especially with the New Who, when there wasn't, the idea that all of a sudden I'm not the last one. There is one more. And yes, he is completely, totally insane, but he's still one of my race. So it's understandable. Right.
No, that's true.
And given what they later establish about Time Lord regenerations, this wouldn't have necessarily been in his head at the time because it hadn't been established. But given what we know now, he could view them as potential Adam and Eve.
That's
and
true.
rebirth the race.
That true. It doesn't bear to think about that too much. So the Valiant is apparently a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier.
I could imagine Peter Capaldi marrying Missy.
Yeah, well, okay, that's fine. Let's not talk about that too much.
Anyways,
so the Valiant,
the
Valiant is a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, basically.
The Avengers show up. Oh, I mean,
yes. Saxon makes a joke about grits being American. That was a nice funny moment.
He says, what are grits anyway? So for everyone who doesn't know, speaking as a Southerner, grits are ground hominy. Yeah. And hominy is a preparation of corn that has been soaked in an alkali solution, which makes it puff up and take on a new texture. So you alkalize the corn, then you dry it out, then you grind it up to make the grits, then you pour water in the grits, and you heat the grits so that it becomes a kind of paste. And then you give flavor to the grits by adding butter or hot sauce or whatever you want to add.
Half a stick of butter. Oh, I mean,
yeah.
Yes. So it's corn mush. Very yummy. The Master has turned the TARDIS, but we found out the Master's turned the TARDIS into a paradox machine, which we're not told yet what a paradox machine is. We're eventually going to find that out in the next episode.
Yeah, and notice Martha immediately says, well, why don't you turn it off? And the Doctor says, touch one bit and the wrong bit and you blow up the solar system. That's going to create a plot problem in the next episode, because when they finally deal with the paradox machine, they're not doing some delicate procedure. They're just shooting bullets at it.
Right, right. So they're potentially blowing up the solar system. The Master, while he's watching Winter get ready to be annihilated because he knows what's about to happen, he's sitting with Lucy eating jelly babies with her. A nice reference to the Fourth Doctor. And he orders the Toclafane to kill the president, captures the Doctor, kills Jack, although he knows Jack is going to
coming back.
I like the glee of the Master. Is like, the great thing about killing him is I can do it again in just a few minutes.
Right. Very Missy-like of him, which is Michelle Gomez does it better, but
it's fun to see him doing it, though.
Yes, yes.
He also unveils he's got a laser screwdriver, which Roger Delgado's Master had, and we have another little meta moment where he says, "Who would want Sonic?"
Right, right.
Because obviously a laser is better than Sonic.
Lasers are always better than Sonic. Yeah.
But he's also put the technology from Dr. Lazarus all the way back to the Lazarus experiment. The Master has been setting up the Doctor.
Yep.
And Lazarus had this biotech that would affect your age if you had someone's biosignature. And he's compacted that technology now so his laser screwdriver can do it. And he says, if only I had the Doctor's biological code. Oh, I do. And he unveils he's got the hand.
Right.
The disembodied hand. So he then ages the Doctor to where he's like physically 100 years older.
Yes. And he looks like he he'll end up eventually, not yet, but eventually he'll end up looking like one of the house elves from Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was going to say a tiny homunculus, but then I haven't seen many Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, he'll be a... Yeah,
the special effects for the super advanced Doctor were not good. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. The makeup here is actually pretty good. It
is pretty good.
Tenet. Yeah, I have to say that. Then the Master activates the paradox machine, which opens up a rift between here and wherever the Toclafane are, which we'll find out is the end of the universe.
And as he does that, we have a pop culture incorporation into the show, because they start playing a song. Since the Master's had this drum beat in his head that they've been making a big deal of. They play some song I've never heard of before, but it's obviously a pop song called "Here Come the Drums."
Well, it's actually called Voodoo Child.
Voodoo Child.
Okay,
and it's actually where the title, "The Sound of Drums," comes from, because that's one of the lines from the song. And then, of course, the Master says, "Here come the drums," and then, of course, that's also part of the song, because that's the first thing you hear from the song as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the name of the album from the Rogue Traders, which is
Rogue Traders,
a band.
I think Australia, New Zealand. I can't remember which.
It was an Australian rock band. Yep.
Yep.
I can't help thinking who let the dogs out at this point.
which would have totally changed this episode, that's for sure. So there are 6 billion Toclafane coming through this rift, which would make it one for each person on Earth. And the Master orders them to decimate the population, which...
And they use the word decimate in its historically accurate sense.
Yes. Decimate means to literally kill 1 on every 10.
Yeah, because that's what Roman generals would do if they thought their troops had not fought sufficiently bravely. They would just kill 1 in 10 at random.
Yeah, yeah. So then we end. That's where we end. Where the Martha Jones, she manages to get off the teleport using the vortex manipulator. I think it is to get off the helicarrier. She's on the run. While the Toclafane are decimating the Earth, and we get to see these images of people in reacting in horror to these things showing up and killing.
Here's kind of the stupid thing though about that, her teleporting off. So Jack is handing her the thing and saying teleport away. Why didn't he just hit the button and both of them disappear?
Yeah. Why didn't he go with her? That would have been handy to have Jack with all of his experience and
exactly.
But Martha wouldn't get to be. Martha,
the hero.
Is the hero.
Yeah. And this is something that's part of Martha's character arc, because when we start, she's a medical student with potential, and we've seen her grow over the course of the series to progressively become more mature and more capable. And I thought it was a very effective moment where she does teleport as the decimation of the human race is occurring, and she materializes in this park. And the music swells and she gets this determined look and says, I'm coming back. So, she's not just running. She's on a mission.
Right.
And she then starts heading off into the woods. And I thought this is the moment where she evolves into an action hero.
Right.
Which we'll see even more of that down the line.
Right. When she comes back with... It's with Donna.
The Osterhagen key, where she's in full action hero mode there, and later when she's married to Mickey.
Yes, yes, Mickey and her together again, or together for the first time. So, and that's where we end. To be continued in The Last of the Time Lords. How will the Doctor ever get out of this predicament he's in? We'll find out. So, any other notes on this episode before we wrap things up?
I just had one. There's a moment right at the beginning of the episode where the Master is settling into Downing Street, and Tish comes up to him and asks hands him some folders or something, and asks what she's supposed to do. And he very patronizingly says, "Just stand there and look gorgeous." And it's like, okay, the casual sexism here is off-putting, but also appropriate for his character.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly fitting for his character.
Right. It's jarring. I mean, it would have been jarring even then, but even now, especially now, given all of the news the last year or so, it is jarring to see that. Anything else? Any other notes?
Nothing here.
So before we wrap up, we want to take a moment, as we often do, to thank you, our listeners, but also especially our patrons. All of our listeners should thank our patrons, because it's the patrons who make it possible for us to have Secrets of Doctor Who. Without the patrons supporting us financially, we wouldn't be doing this. It's just it wouldn't be possible for us to do all of the shows we do at SQPN. So we are very grateful to them. And we want to especially thank this week by name, Stephanie L., Heather C., John T., Victor L., and Tammy L. It's through their generous donations and of all the patrons at sqpn.com/give that makes it possible for us to do Secrets of Doctor Who, Secrets of Star Trek, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and all the shows that we have at StarQuest Media. So thank you so much. And if you are able to join them in financially supporting StarQuest Media, please go to sqpn.com/give. Whatever you can do is greatly appreciated. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Sound of Drums, this second of 3 episodes in this season finale? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave us some feedback there. Leave a comment. You can send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. You can follow us on Twitter, as I mentioned before. You can send us a comment there at SQPN. We'll be back next time when we will be discussing the episode Last of the Time Lords. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Hey, glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, this country has been sick. This country needs healing. This country needs medicine. In fact, I'd go so far as to say what this country really needs right now is a doctor.